Were we not
Okay,
recording?
we're recording.
Before?
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
okay, we are
recording now.
recording. Well, we're just talk. Do you want to do what we did last week, where we start talking and then we go, "Oh yeah, hi, this is the red pill," or this is
That's what we're doing, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah?
yeah. What was it
That's
interesting? Yeah.
What was interesting? Oh, no, part later in the film. Anyway,
No.
we're here again.
Yeah. Hello.
Episode 2 of...
The
my
Suicidal
chair.
Cinefiles.
Yep, that's it. That's the
Well,
thing.
10 out of 10 for introduction right now.
Yep. Flawless execution. Flawless execution. Anyway, as if you do follow us, all 5 of you probably, you'll know that we're talking about a couple of documentaries this week by the same director, Cassie Jaye, of Jaybird Productions. I think that's a production company.
Yeah.
Interesting 2 films.
Yeah. We're talking about her first and her most recent film.
Yeah.
So the first film being Daddy I Do, which came out in 2010.
Yep, 2010.
And
that was about,
Oh.
a bunch of things, mostly about the politics surrounding like teen pregnancy and things like that. So stuff like abstinence training and abortions and contraception and all that sort of stuff.
The purity ball.
Purity balls, that's the weirdest part of it.
Yeah. Also...
and the other one is the red pill, which is she's a self-proclaimed feminist who, ended up looking at the men's rights movement instead. And it's... we'll mostly be talking about that.
Yeah.
Because the Daddy I Do is a lot less interesting, and it's also...
I think it's also less about interesting and more the fact that didn't have a strong of a expository point, I guess. It was a lot of... Because it was a first documentary. We were talking about how the fact that a lot of it was just a bunch of information, and there was a very, very kind of just, here's all this stuff you should know about. Whereas the red pill talks more about her own personal journey and her own thoughts, because there's a video diary throughout the documentary of her own.
So yeah, it's Daddy I Do is more of a it's kind of pretty good actually. It's how lots of things should be done. It's like you sit back and you let them all of them talk at you pretty much all the sides of it. She asks a few questions and she says this and that, but she's not really much of a agent in how things play out.
She kind of just narrates what's happening and fills you in on a few gaps here and there, but a lot of it's just a lot of just people
she doesn't
talking.
Introduce herself or anything. She just it just starts.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, we'll start properly with the red pill probably.
I was going to say we should do a bit about Daddy I Do and then
okay.
If you sorry.
Yeah, let's do that.
I think we very quickly. I think the biggest part that stood out to me was that whole talk about abortions. The purity, the silver ring thing was also a huge thing in there, which was talking about how girls or boys would have a silver ring placed on their ring finger.
Yeah.
And that pretty much means I'm going to abstain from sex until marriage.
Well, it's almost like an indicator I'm still a virgin sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like a virgin ring.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is.
and then
they take a vow when they're younger, and then when they marry their partner that they've chosen, they give it to them.
Yeah,
it's a symbolic thing.
It's kind of creepy, I think.
The way it's done, the way that it looks in the film is creepy. It looks creepy, but
the biggest thing actually was the whole story about that lady getting the abortion. I'm not sure if you remember that part, but
what's her name?
She had a planned pregnancy with her
young
boyfriend.
Girl? Yeah, the younger girl who.
She's like my age, 20-something, I think. And she had a planned pregnancy with her partner, boyfriend at the time.
He was away, and he kept saying,
"Oh yeah, I want a boy. I want a." Oh,
he said for a while he wanted a
baby,
and then as soon as she got pregnant, he said abort it.
Yeah, because I found someone else.
Yeah, because he found
that story spoke to me because, ironically enough, today I had a friend who I spoke to, and I have a permission to tell you the story. And she was 15 when she first got pregnant.
Yep.
She is pregnant now again, but back when she was 15, she was with a guy who was abusive to her. Her exact words were an absolute wanker.
Yep.
Could make a current partner / boyfriend look like a saint.
Yep.
And she decided to abort it. And she was 4 months into her pregnancy, a very big deal into her pregnancy. But she originally thought that she couldn't have kids after that. But then it turns out she got pregnant again. And so I asked her, I'm like, would you go back and change anything? And she says no. And she says it just wasn't a good place for the child. And she's like, if I had had that kid back then, it would have been a really horrible situation for the child to be born into, for me to be born into, because I was in this horrible relationship. And ironically enough, that's what it reminded me of when that lady was telling her story, because initially you see that she did regret having the abortion for their baby, but then later on, as the film ends, you see the text come up and it actually shows that she now has 2 kids. She's very happy and she doesn't regret anything anymore. She's just a very, she's happy with her choice, and she doesn't want to go back.
I thought that part was interesting as well, because she did say that pretty much everybody who does it regrets it on some level, because it's not a nice thing to go through at all. Like, I mean, it's it's a difficult thing, because like lots of people have varying different opinions on it. It's like the political side, people who they usually make it one extreme or the other, and it's I think the good thing about the documentary is that because everybody just talks and it's all different people, you kind of get a good grasp of everything, enough to sort of go, okay, I understand it a bit better.
Yeah. But yeah, no, what was I going to say? She completely forgotten now. She said this huge thing, which was she's pregnant right now and she's having an absolute shit time. She's been vomiting. I've been working with her for the past 8 months when she was pregnant. From day one, it was just vomiting, constant vomiting, nonstop, all through the first trimester, all through the second trimester. She's in her final trimester now and she's still vomiting, constantly unwell. And she's like, I can't wait for this baby to get out of me, freaking it's ruining my body. But she says to me, she's like, you know what, at the end of the day, I have no regrets of what happened. And I think she's like, it hurt me that I was devastated when I had the abortion, because I felt like I'd already connected with the child. But she's like, it doesn't change the fact that it would have been a horrible situation for me and the kid. And I wouldn't be here where I was if I did have him or her. But yeah, I think I just wanted to let you know that, because that kind of, it was really bizarre, and the fact that someone I knew had that experience. Yeah. And it was in the story as well. That was a very dreary note to start off with.
It was a bit.
Yeah, but she's very, to be fair, she's very happy now, and she's very, very content. She is a single mum at the moment, but, she's like, look, I've got all the support I need, and I'm moving full force ahead with this pregnancy, so she's very happy.
Anyway.
But yeah, anyways, I think we should move on to the red pill.
Yes, the red pill's the really
good one.
The really good one. Because, I mean, just from a filmmaking standpoint, it's much better.
Much more interesting.
It's basic stuff. I mean, she's obviously got better cameras and all sorts of stuff. That's not a big deal, but...
It's a stronger pushing point, though. Like, you can clearly see where the film is heading.
Well, she's edited it very well. And that's, documentaries have always made in the editing, really. It's because you can direct a bit, but if you're doing just interviews and stuff, you've got to know later on
because you can't
what the big points are.
You can't control what other people say, so
hopefully you're not controlling what other people say.
That's the thing. The thing with documentaries is sometimes when they're trying to push a certain point, obviously they can edit it so it seems a certain way.
Yeah. Well, Michael Moore's known for doing that.
Yeah.
But this doesn't seem that way. I was actually watching this morning. So Cassie Jaye basically says at the end of the film that she doesn't call herself a feminist anymore. She starts off like that. The last line of the film is her saying, I no longer call myself that. So, and it's interesting because I saw there were actually 2 articles that came up today, actually linked through the Red Pill Facebook page that I saw, which was, one of them was actually Australian articles. So one was from The Australian, the other one was Herald Sun. The one from The Australian was basically detailing how there have been several attempts here in Australia to screen this movie, one in Sydney and one in Melbourne, and they've both been shut down.
I did actually hear about that too. I heard that the film, people just refused to have it played.
Well, it's funny because it's like the session was sold out, but they have to cancel it because of this protest is happening or whatever. And I mean, that's stupid and annoying, but and that's one of the whole points of the film is like if you go into it and you watch it, because you can watch it online still. if you go in and watch it knowing that there are protests by feminist groups that have stopped the film from airing, it just kind of proves the point of the film in the end, which is the conversation goes one way and it's not sort of allowed to go the other way.
I think there's this huge thing I also realised. Before we continue, I just want to state that I am a feminist. But my definition of feminism is a bit more liberal, I think, in the sense that I do not believe a lot of the things that they said feminists have done or they showed that feminists have done, I think is really embarrassing for me personally. I just think, oh my God, I can't believe that we can be so misrepresented in certain ways. But like, I think there's this really weird idea that if you're someone who talks about, men's rights, you're a misogynist.
Yeah.
And it's not like that. I think they're actually on the same side. They're on the same side, both wanting equal rights for men and women. But it's just like, I think some women are so in that zone of men are just always oppressing women that they're like thinking, no, it's because of your white, what's it called? Your white privilege and you're pushing us against because you're scared. And it's not like that. I think it's also the fact that they themselves are also victims of certain societal standards that have been placed upon them. I think a big one was the fact that men aren't allowed to be emotional. That might not be true in these.
I don't know whether that was the whole thing of the documentary. I think it was
that was something that I've come to realize, though, because I read an article ages ago, and it talks about this lady who dressed up as a guy, and she kind of tricked some of her colleagues into thinking she was a man, and she hung out with them, and drank with them, and became friends. And she said, what, guys, they're not allowed to really be emotional. They're not allowed to really show that they care or do this or that, and it's actually very, very traumatic for them because they can't just be honest with their feelings. But here, like in the actual film, it talks about, how certain men, they're not allowed paternal rights. They're not allowed, they're not allowed any rights to their kids or, in a way, like if a woman wants an abortion, that's just it. The men don't really have that much of a stand.
Or adopt the baby.
Or adoption, exactly.
Anyway, we'll go sort of more specifically. So the film sort of opens with her, Cassie Jaye's, sort of her backstory. She details of like how she got to where she is, pretty much, and that's important because any film characters have to change throughout the film. So she sets herself up as this thing. When she was young, she was quite withdrawn, and then she got involved in acting, and then I think she moved to LA, and she tried to be acting, and then she said she got pigeonholed into being the blonde damsel, that dies, pretty much, and that annoyed her. So she sort of became more of a feminist and all that sort of stuff, and then she made a film about, Daddy I Do, the purity balls and things like that, and then the gay marriage issue as well. And then she moved on to try and have a look at what rape culture was, and then came across A Voice for Men, which is the big figure in A Voice for Men is Paul Elam, who's the first person she talks to in the film, and sort of starts to go, okay, mate. And she actually said, I was watching it's actually an interview she did with Andrew Bolt, who I'm not a big fan of, but she did an interview with him last year at around November, basically saying that when she went in to make the film, she fully intended to cover them as like misogynistic woman bashers. She thought that's what they were. Yeah. And then she went in and went, that's not true.
Yeah, no.
So it sort of starts off with that, and then it moves on to a guy called Warren Farrell, who's been around for a while. And he basically was there like in the second wave feminism, sort of late 60s, early 70s, and saw it as not just an opportunity for women, but an opportunity for men as well, because he thought, but like basically he breaks it down as he saw marriage relationships back then as being a woman would marry to a successful man for his money and his position, so that she could live well. And he said it's not good for women because he saw that as a sort of prostitution. And he said it wasn't good for men because it was like, how do you know if you're liked for what you have or who you are? So he thought it would be a great thing for both, share the load sort of thing. And then he sort of, as he sort of started to talk about men's issues, he found himself getting pushed out of events and like not being invited to
Yeah.
this and that to talk,
I think
to the point where it goes to a pretty famous protest of one of his events a few years back. I think it was 2013, maybe. I don't
I'm
even
not
know.
too sure. Is that the one with that lady screaming?
Yeah,
Oh my
it's
God.
basically a bunch of men turned up to listen to him speak,
Yeah.
and there was
It
a huge
was-
feminist group outside yelling and screaming at
It
them
was
that they
really
were
horrible.
rape
They were scum.
apologists
Yeah, it was.
and so on.
That was the part that got to me the most. That really got me quite angry because I'm thinking, men have every right to feel. They have every right to feel like the world is against them and that they are suppressed in certain ways, because there's never a situation where there's it's. How do I say this? Life is never a storybook. There's never an enemy. There's never a villain and a protagonist. Or
It's not that easy.
It's not
basically.
that easy. If it was that easy, then we could read a book and fix everything. And like the way, like I said, I don't think I'm not a feminist. Even after all of that, I still believe in feminism, and I still believe that I'm a feminist. But I believe that if a guy needs support, if a guy has been abused, if a guy has been, had violence towards him from a woman, I'm still going to stand by him. It's not a gender thing. It's an equality thing. For
Well,
me.
that's what they get into in the film. They're just like, as far as domestic violence goes, it's not really a gender issue. It's just a violence issue.
It's just people who are violent, and they're just
because they break. I think it's something like the statistics ended up being that it was for domestic violence. In the case of I think it was 57% of the victims were women and 43% were men. But all except for
shelters?
one shelter is for women,
Women,
and there's
yeah.
one for men in Arkansas. I think it is.
some place in the middle of nowhere. That kind of broke my heart a little bit because, and there were not a lot of stories, but a good amount of stories of men getting sexually assaulted too.
There are a few of
And
those too. Yeah.
there's this whole thing where, oh well, it's not rape if you liked it, or
Yeah.
why didn't you just enjoy it? And I'm like, it doesn't matter what it is.
Well, there's sufficient evidence that I think it was something like, I read this a while ago, it's like 70% of women admit that during a rape they climax, but it's not because they want, like it's just it's like a reaction.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same
For
on the
men
other side as well. It's
Yeah.
just like, you don't say, oh, well, you're obviously enjoying it, so it's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not how it works.
It's like consent matters in every aspect, okay? Just because, like, oh, you finish or you climax doesn't mean it's enjoyable. Like,
No.
it's a thing. Like, it's kind of like the equivalent of, if someone puts pepper up your nose, you're going to sneeze.
Yeah, sneeze, yeah.
It's like, oh, well, you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
No, it's not. That's not a good example. But I think, like, it's really sad for me to see men who have been abused getting turned away because, oh, they have to toughen up, or they're men. They can't be. That's the worst thing. They can't be abused. They can't be sexually harassed because they are men. I think that's a big load of bullshit. The biggest load of bullshit, because I think in today's day and age, we should know better that anyone can be a victim of sexual harassment. And I think it's, speaking of abusive and all that stuff, there's this huge thing in terms of the court, or in terms of the justice
Yeah, the family
system,
court in
the family
America.
court, or the fact that, like, when women accuse men of being abusive, there's no question about it. Fine, the men get taken away.
Yeah.
And I think that's also there's this huge thing about rape culture where they're saying, oh, well, when women say they've been raped, they're never taken seriously. And I'm like, I think
Yeah,
the
take
biggest...
them way more seriously than men are, pretty
But
much.
not even that. I think women aren't taken seriously at certain... And I'm not saying that this is, the be-all, end-all, and this is just my opinion, but I think sometimes they're not taken seriously because I've known women to use rape as a way to get back at their previous partner, just in a form of revenge. And I'm like, that's not okay. That's in no way okay for you to do that.
Well,
but the court sides with them, though. They go, oh, okay, well,
Well, that I mean, it damages an innocent person, but two, it sets a bad precedent for women who've actually been raped.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like, did you really?
Yeah.
People start to question that if
exactly.
it's rubbish.
I think they think it's some sort of joke. Like, oh, it's with everything, though. When you start using, like, I spoke about 13 Reasons Why in my own blog, like literally a day ago, and the way that they portray, like, a bullying and suicide and stuff, it takes away from the actual victims, and it takes away from people who've actually experienced something like that, because they've kind of made it out, not like it's a joke, but they made it out to be a lot less serious than what it really is. And, like, honestly, I think it just does more damage than it's really worth. And it does show in the film. It does show, like, the fact that all these men they get pushed aside. They go, well, you can't be abusive, or, you know, you can only abuse, is like this huge thing. It's just like, it's because of maybe possibly decades of conditioning through societal's behalf that, oh, well, is this idea of females are the victims always and men are always the perpetrators.
Yeah, that's said in the film, that that's always one and not the other. And it's
and that's ridiculous, I think.
I think it's interesting though, because there's you know, lots of parts of the debate that lots of people just ignore, and I think it's like, to say that there's no difference between the genders is silly in my opinion, because it's obvious. And it's interesting because I think like people who are probably interested in this film probably have been following issues like this anyway, so they're probably familiar with people like Jordan B. Peterson in Toronto, who's talked about the transgender issue a lot because that was what got him attention. And it's not intentional attention. He just refused to use certain terms because he thought it was stupid. And more than that, he thought it was sinister. But I was listening to one of his lectures recently. He's a clinical psychologist who teaches at Toronto University in Canada, obviously. And he talks about there's always a wage gap thing people mention all the time. And seems to be, to me, and I think a lot of people, that it's a simple definition problem, because it's like what they do in the statistics is they take the general wages over a lifetime, and it's not a wage, it's an earning. So the wages are what you're paid hourly or whatever your pay rate is, and earnings is what you got over your life or the year or whatever. And so they basically, what he did in one of his lectures, he broke it down because he's worked with so many people who've had problems, and like he knows the stories, and like highly professional people. He talks about like the high paid women who rise to these like incredibly high positions, and he basically says it's like the narrative that feminists sell them on the high paying career.
Yeah.
And he basically, you know, breaks down, and I'm sort of like not quoting him exactly, but he basically said, you know, they went through high school, they ripped it apart, they were really smart, and they just went through. Yeah. They went through college straight through. You know, they went through law school or whatever. He gives the example of a lawyer. Went through law school, aced it. You know, became partner at the law firm, like the top. Yeah. By the time she's 30, he goes, and then he goes, "What's the reality of that?" He goes, "You work all the time." He goes, "Your work week is 70 to 80 hours a week." Yeah. He goes, "You have to like wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning when a client from China calls you." Because they have a very complicated legal problem that they need solved now. Yeah. And you can't make any mistakes.
Yeah, or else they could just find someone else to do it for you.
And he goes, well, what tends to happen at this point, he goes, he goes, and you have to ask yourself a question at that point. It's like, who the hell wants to live like that? Yeah. And he basically went, you know, he said, by this point, you know, they're 30, 31, 30, like around that age. Yeah. He goes, they've usually married somebody who makes as much or more than they do. Yeah. He goes, and the money doesn't add anything to their life.
Yeah, I think, sorry if you don't mind me interrupting, that's really funny that you've mentioned that, because there was this whole chat about how men are supposed to be the bread makers, and if you can't, breadwinners, bread maker, breadwinner, it's all the same. But they're supposed to be the breadwinners. And if they can't make the money, then they're not considered valuable. And then women are the ones who's supposed to stay home, do the cooking, do the dishes, on that. And then I think when you say that, it's this whole build-up of, well, I think, or maybe not all women, but I say a good portion of women want kids. And as shitty as this is, when you have a child, so many things go on the backboard. Yeah, all these things that were a priority are no longer a priority because your family comes first. And I think the most important thing I've learned is that there is nothing wrong with that. There is literally nothing wrong with saying, I want to be a house mum. Yeah. I want to stay at home, cook dinner for my kids, cook dinner for my husband while my husband makes money. At the same time, there is also nothing wrong with you saying, I want my husband to stay home, do the dishes, cook food, and I want to go out and make the bread. Yeah,
I think if you're earning more money, then sure.
Yeah, sure, exactly. And I think there's this huge stigma between the fact that, oh, well, if you're it's ironic. It's ironic. Well, I wouldn't say ironic, but it's the fact that you're at home all the time, your husband's making all the money, and people are thinking, oh, gosh, oh god, you don't even have a career. What do you do in your spare time? You're not
The
successful.
The way that the feminists sort of portray it is like you're a slave to him and the children, and it's like...
But on the flip side, if you're super successful, you're earning more than your husband, then all of a sudden it's like, well, you don't spend enough time with your kids. Your kids are just at play school all the time. Oh, and then your husband's getting like treated like, your husband's not doing anything. He's lazy. He's this, is that.
Exactly.
So you can't win. You cannot win. There is no situation for you to be sick because you can't do this all the time. You can't hold a child in one arm, go to work at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Exactly.
That's not how it works.
Well, it's actually part of that whole spiel he gives on this whole thing. He's talking about this whole thing. He goes, they marry a man who's sort of equivalent. He goes, and that's what he goes, women tend to marry somebody who is either the same age or 5 years older, or maximum 5 years older. He goes, and they tend to, income tends to go with that too.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and he goes, so they get a much easier job, like 9 to 5, the hours are regular. Yeah. And then they can spend time with their kids.
Yeah.
And
well, this is what I've learned. My aunt, she's not really my aunt, but like biologically she's not my aunt, but she and my mum are very close, so I consider her my aunt. And she has a PhD. She works like not a CEO, but she works for a very, very like a super hardcore company. Kind of. I don't know what it's called, Amway, I think. And you've heard of it. And she doesn't have kids, and my mum always was that type of person. She's like, I really want a child. When I get to a certain age, I'm going to have a kid. And my mum could have stayed in China and had a very cushy life, but she decided to move to Australia, for me and for her family, because she's like, it's just a better country. It's more liberal. Whereas my aunt was more like, well, I'm more looking towards business, more looking towards success. And she is very successful, but she doesn't have kids because she said to me, she's like, by the time I had the chance to sit down and think about my family, and
it's too late.
I was in my late 40s.
Yeah.
And I think, not saying that it's impossible to have success and a family. Not saying that's impossible, but for you to get there, the amount of effort, the amount of time, the circumstances just have to be absolutely perfect. And how many times in your life can all the variables align into a perfect circle, get everything like sorted, get full pregnant, but your job is this, and this is that, and you get this money. Unless you're like some form of like James Bond figure who can like shoot people with one hand and like rock a chair with a foot. Like it just doesn't happen. And like I can speak for myself when I say, you know what? Sometimes when things get too much, you just gonna have to put things in the backboard, like the back of your head, and just be like, you know what, that has to come later, and it just has to. And like I said, I'm not saying that this is going to be everyone in the world who's like saying, oh, you know what, I can be successful and have a family. Sure, of course you can, but do you really want to just freak yourself over like that? Like, do you really just want to, is it worth all the stress and all that just to be said, okay, you're a success? Because I think some people at the end of the day think just the fact that I have a very loving family, that I have food on the table, that's already a success.
Well, it's actually interesting because the way he sort of finishes his spiel on it is he basically says your career as a career will peak when you're like in your 40s. Yeah. He goes, and then it just diminishes over time. And he goes, so you've got to have something to do with your time. Yeah. He goes, kids are pretty good for that. Like, but yeah, it's. And the other point that a lot of people bring up as well is like it's interesting because there is a whole thing of like you give women sort of an equal standing with men in lots of in countries. Wealth tends to generate in those places. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because it's just the workforce is bigger. Yeah. The other point he does make is like, back in like 73 or whatever, like it was still kind of possible to have one person earning in the house and the whole household would be all right.
That's
and one of the reasons that could be interpreted is that when women entered the labour force, then it was double the amount of labour, therefore it's worth half as much. Yeah. And that's another interesting sort of economical argument as well about it's not an argument to bring it back or anything like that, but he's just saying like this is
just something to consider.
It makes sense. Yeah. The argument makes sense. But it's I don't know, it's an interesting sort of thing, and it's but yeah, I just don't think people.
I think people are incredibly.
Or rather, I think it's a certain type of person.
I don't want to say stupid. Stupid's probably. I think the fact is they're not well informed, and I think
it's not stupid. It's ignorant.
Ignorant. Thank you. Yeah. I think it's this whole idea like I come from a family of very powerful women. Like everyone in my family, like I said, my aunt, my grandma, my mom, like everyone on that side of my family, they're all very strong women. And my grandma is, you know, she worked at home and she'd look after my mum. And my mum and my dad worked equally. In fact, I think I can honestly say my mum worked harder than my dad. And she was the main organizer of money, finances in my house, like the food, you know, whatever she wanted to invest in terms of finances, my dad would listen to her, and that was fine too. You know, my dad would gladly listen to her. He earned more, but she was kind of the neck of the family. He was the head, she was the neck, and he turned which way she wanted him to turn. And like, so I grew up in a family like that, but my mum always made it clear to me. She's like, whatever you want to do, okay? It just depends on what you feel like is success. Because she's like, because she wanted me to have a kid. She's like, when you have a child, you know, you're going to have to depend on, you know, your partner a little more. And that's okay, because that's what happened. Because she had a really horrible pregnancy with me. She's like, I had to depend on your dad a lot more. But then when certain things happened, like my dad, he lost his job. And so she had to work double shifts to kind of keep up. And she's like, that is what equality is, though. She's like,
it's what happens.
It's just, well, that's life.
Yeah.
And she's just like, it talks about the idea. She's just like, you know what? Some days you're going to be dependent on him, and then some days he's going to be dependent on you.
Yep.
And I'm maybe not using he or she, or some days they're going to be dependent on you. Some days you're going to be dependent on them. Okay. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about in that. Because what's the point of you being in this relationship, having that support, having those, like, that other person in your life, if they're not going to support you when you're down, and you're not going to, like, you can't expect them to push you up and for you to push them down all the time. It's going to be a two-way street. And like this whole, like I said, this whole idea of like men having to, you know, be the breadwinner, having to do all the hard work, and then women have to stay at home. And then obviously a lot of feminists is like, well, that's wrong. You know, women should be successful. And I'm like, fine, women can be successful. That's fine. But you forget, women are the only ones that can... If men could carry children, women would be plenty successful. Because they'd be like, okay, well, you can stay home, be pregnant, do whatever you need to do. You know, if you're sick, that's fine.
But then you'd also... I mean, you'd be pretty much biologically the same, and everybody'd be women.
Yeah. Well, everyone would be men, equally terrifying.
Yeah, whatever it is, like, it's...
But since we, if you don't mind me moving on from what we were just talking about, we could talk about probably, like I said, paternity rights.
Yes.
That was a big thing.
It's a big part of this film. It's like the whole middle bit is about the paternity thing. So it's the sort of... I think it's something like 81 or 82% of children out of a divorce, I think, end up going with the mother, and the rest with the father. And it's like, I mean, obviously, you know, sometimes it's perfectly all right one way or the other.
I think it's kind of horrible, though, that because you're talking about how men have all the power, when in reality, in such a situation, women have all the power, and they can manipulate it however they want. And it really broke my heart to see that certain fathers couldn't see their daughters.
Well, there's one particularly devastating case in the thing where he's one of the guys who he's president of the National Coalition for Men, I think, Harry Crouch.
So he said Barry Crouch.
He talks quite a lot in the film. I think he's one of the bigger parts of the film in terms of the paternity thing, and he talks about one young guy. I can't remember whether they mentioned his name or not, but I
was it the one who had a baby and then the mum gave it up for adoption without his...
I don't know the actual thing, but they said that they had a photo of him up on the wall as like a memory because he'd killed himself because he'd spent like every cent he had going to court. He'd done like all this stuff. He'd been denied this. Because of this, he wasn't functioning at work. He was going to lose his job. Yeah. And then they found him out in the desert, I think, somewhere. He shot himself. And like that gets, obviously, Crouch really upset. But it's like one of the more extreme cases. But there are several sort of ones. There's like she doesn't necessarily go into depth with all of them, but she just sort of lays them out. Here's one. Yeah. And one of them is a younger guy I don't think he's married to the woman, but she just gives up for the adoption and like lays out all the things he would have had to do to have kept the daughter.
Yeah. Versus what the women would have had to done.
All she had to do was say adoption, sign it off, and then it was done. He had to, like, the day before he knew about it, he didn't know about it.
Yeah.
The day before, he had to like do like 3 things in the court and do all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, get rights, get all this stuff, get
all
medical
this stuff.
bills, get ID. It was just ridiculous.
Just to keep the kid.
Yeah, and the thing that actually disturbed me, because I think I just can't believe someone would actually think that or think they have the right to do that, which was this like clip, I don't know from what talk show it was, and it was pretty much this lady saying, "Oh, my
that was messed. That's kind of another section as well, because they do talk. There's the whole bit of like, they know it's the father.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, the father has no... It is actually the child of the father that we're talking about. So, and he has no rights to it. But then it's... And that includes, like, a guy who's... Yeah, most of the cases are like, the woman has adopted the baby off to somebody without letting the father know at all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll just quickly tell you what the talk shows... What happened in talk shows, the scene, which pretty much says this lady stands up and the lady's like, "Oh yeah, what's going on?" You know,
it's basically an all women's talk show. Like the whole audience is women, the host is a woman. I can't remember. She's like called Kelly something. I can't quite remember. And
this lady's like, "Oh well, I want a baby. My husband doesn't want a baby."
She says that her husband said that they'd have 2 kids. They've had 1, and she wants a second one, and he doesn't want to have one now.
Should I trick my husband?
Yes, she's like, should I just stop taking birth control?
All the women,
and all the women's like, yeah,
and I'm like, oh no, no, what the fuck, dude? That's fucking like, you don't do that. I think I just don't understand. Okay, maybe it's because my relationship is just like, there's just no boundaries. We just do whatever we want and like doobly doo, whatever. Literally, like, if I wanted a cat or if I wanted another cat, I'd just be like, I want another cat, and he'll be like, no, and I'm like, I want one, and we just, kick off at each
argue
other.
until there's some sort of consensus.
Yeah, argue until like, it's never a thought of I'm going to trick someone into doing it. Like, it literally.
It's not like you just come home with a cat.
Yeah, no, well, yeah. Maybe cat's a bad example, but like, it would. Let's just go really off the scale. Let's say I like call him up one day. I'm like, I want to do porn, and he's like, no, and we just start arguing each other.
And all of a sudden, there's a release on the internet. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, shut up. But like, it would never be a situation of I go off to do porn and he finds out 6 months later while going on Pornhub or like whatever the other website. I actually only know Pornhub. That's really sad. But like, it never like, so it just completely freaks me out how certain relationships will just somehow end up with the guy finding out like 8 months in the pregnancy that, oh, he has a son. Or I'm like, I understand if you guys are in an on and off relationship, not really serious or anything like that.
Well, it's funny because that particular thing on the talk show, that's not even like one of the particularly bad ones. Like, or like a particularly, because she's talking about like somebody that she's already, I think, married to with 1 kid already. And it's like, okay, if a second one happened, it's like, he'd probably be frustrated, but he'd go, okay.
Yeah, fine. Okay,
but then it's like when he breaks down the difference between wrongful paternity and paternity fraud, that's when you realise exactly what it is. So,
do you know what the terrifying thing is? This happened to me in not like me, but like I heard about this during high school. School where a guy and a girl broke up, and the girl said she was pregnant and pretended that so she would stay with her. And I'm like, excuse me? You can't do that.
It's even worse than that in the documentary because he basically says that wrongful paternity is innocent. Basically, he said like he put down the pen. It's like a woman. She goes, I went to a party, slept with like 4 guys. She goes, I think it's that guy. He goes, she actually didn't know. Yeah. He goes, and then he ends up slept with the baby, even though it's not his, because you have to write down the father on the whatever. And he said the one that's actually like really horrible is the paternity fraud, and he's talking about, I think, an actual case. I think it was in Texas or something, where he's like, a guy and his wife had like 3 little kids who looked exactly the same, like really similar, all like blonde and all that sort of stuff. And like one day the kid got into an accident at school, rushed to hospital, needed blood. Dad turns up, and it's like, oh, sorry, you can't. Blood doesn't match. No. And he's going, that's not possible. And then found out they're not his kids. They're some guy up the road or something that his wife had been having an affair with for ages. Oh, God. He goes, and it's like, how do you think the kids feel? He goes, knowing that dad isn't dad. How do you think the father feels knowing that these 3 kids that he loves and has put everything into,
put his heart and soul into,
aren't his real children? And it's just,
I think, to me,
and that is actually something that men cannot do to women. Like, you can't do it in return. You can't have, like, you can't be gestating a baby
to be fair, having a baby ain't that glamorous.
I know, I'm not saying it is, but it's like, that's really...
Yeah. It was... Ironically, and I keep saying ironically, cut that out, Ren. Edit that out. Once again, I'm going to go back to the friend I was chatting with this afternoon in regards to her pregnancy. Well, firstly, she was like she was rattling off all these side effects, and I was like, "Well, what's the benefits?" She's like, "The baby."
Yeah, pretty big benefit.
Yeah. But she was saying how like when she got pregnant, because she had a lot of issues with her ovaries, and she didn't think, I think it was her ovaries, but she said she thought she couldn't have any kids, so she wasn't taking birth control that seriously, which is how she felt pregnant. But when she did, she was very happy, obviously, because she always wanted a kid, and she was saying to me that the baby daddy, the baby daddy didn't, just pretty much was like, can you just abort it? I don't want it, you know. But she desperately wanted this child, and she said to him, look, you don't have to have anything to, of course legally he has to pay those fees, but
that's the issue, really.
So I personally don't feel like you should pin the woman on the blame on the woman. I'm all over the place, I'm sorry. I don't think you should pin the blame on her, because like she's like, obviously if he could not pay, then fine, like I would just find a way on my own to get the money. I can support myself. She's got a full-time job. But I think it's the court system that needs to go, hang on, he doesn't want anything to do with the baby. They're not really together in a marriage. They're not really together as a partner either. Why does he have to put, if she's happy for him not to pay, and if he doesn't want to, then there should be that ability to be like, you know what, I'm not going to be responsible for that.
If that's the case, then there probably wouldn't be, because you can do that. But I think the issue is like, you have to trust that other person so much.
I think that's where it falls through.
And that's where, the whole thing is like, when the law is supposed to sort of mediate this, and because it doesn't, it leaves it open for exploitation. And that's why you get that other case in the film where she briefly alludes to it, which is there's some, she's watching a news report, I think, on the TV, and it's not the TV, computer. She's looked it up, and it's a guy who's still like paying child support and a bunch of other things for a child that is proved it's not his. Like on DNA, because she just wrote his name down as the father at some point to claim her benefits. Yeah.
I think there needs to be, money shouldn't be just thrown around like that. I think there needs to be a lot more in terms of who has to pay what and who doesn't have to pay what. Because I think if you go have sex with a girl and you're both drunk, and like she doesn't have birth control and you don't have birth control, and then she doesn't take the morning after pill, and somehow she just winds up pregnant, doesn't get it. Firstly, I think it's kind of irresponsible if you feel like you can't support your baby and you still have your baby, and then you kind of just expect your partner / person who had sex with you to give up their money when they didn't even realize either. Obviously, completely irresponsible on both your behalves for not using birth control, number one. But also, I think the fact that if you already know that you're not going to be able to, you know, somehow get enough money to look after your child, why wouldn't you at least kind of like I said, I'm pro-choice, get an abortion as soon as you find out, or have them adopted. But you and I were having this chat, like, I think weeks and weeks ago about, in terms of abortion, how if a lady wants an abortion and she's with a partner who's been with her for a long time, or at least a partner who is fathering that child, how they should have a talk before they have the abortion.
But it was interesting because it's the one thing that they did in this is, the way that she edited it regarding the issue of who's responsible for the child and things like that, is that they talk about this whole, and it's actually interesting watching Daddy I Do as well with this, is that they get, I'm trying to remember her name, she does interview a few feminist figures in the film. Catherine Spiller, who's the executive director of Feminist Majority Foundation and executive editor of Ms. Magazine. She's interviewing her throughout the film as well. She gets cut in as well. And it's interesting where she comes up in the film, because it's regarding sort of this whole thing of work it out with the partner sort of thing. And the whole argument throughout the film is like, they work it out with the partner and then something changes. Something really horrendous changes, and then all of a sudden somebody's screwed. And then she comes on at one point and it's basically just like, well, you know, you really need to talk about this before you have sex and all that sort of stuff. And that was her solution. It's like, but after it, she's just like, then it's all up to the women. And then it's interesting, you watch Daddy I Do, and it's like, that's like the religious Christian argument as well, of you need to have this talk before you do it, and then not realizing that things change.
Yeah, you have to have this idea that life is messy.
Yeah.
There's this thing called life, and it does not go to plan.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how organized you can be. Like, it does not matter if you use like birth control, if you use condoms, use a contraceptive pill. Like, maybe some way, somehow, like, all it takes is that one sperm, one, one, and it just, not saying
I've been educated. Thank you.
I know. I'm just trying
I'm
to.
saying that it's educating me now. I didn't know any of this.
But like, I think I understand where she's coming from, because I've seen the effects of pregnancy on certain people in my life. I've had, actually, once again, cut off that ironically, but I've seen multiple women in the past few years, funnily enough, get pregnant, go through pregnancy, and some of them have a great time. Some of them are like, oh, freaking hell, I'm walking on sunshine and daisies all day. And some people are just like, every day is a horror show. I hate it. I feel horrible. I'm sick. Like, this is hurting, that's hurting. My ribs are cracking. Like, So I understand this idea that once they have the baby, it's their choice. I think where I draw the line would be that if you just have the baby, fine, but that is your responsibility, because you have to, whether your partner chooses to be with you, okay, I understand. At the same time, if you want to get rid of the baby because you feel like you're not ready for it, I understand that too. But I think there's too much of a, well, you know what, it's my kid, my baby, my body. Okay, cool. Agree with you. But then if you have a long-standing partner with you, someone who wants the child desperately, then you should at least consider. And I think there should be less of a stigma for men to be like, you know what, I want to keep this child. I think there is, like, if, for example, I get pregnant, and then my partner says, I want to say, look, I'm not ready. I want an abortion. I'm terrified. I don't, like, freaking hell, I don't want to pop out of my, my body. I don't want a baby to be pushed out of my vagina. I don't know. And he goes, well, I really, really, really want this kid. I'm like desperate for children. I think we're ready. I wouldn't just be like, fuck you, I'm going to go fucking have abortion.
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, okay, well, how about you tell me why? And you tell me what we can do, and you, in a way, prove to me that we can do this. I'm not saying he has to justify his opinion, but you can say, well, if he turns around and says, you know what, I'm gonna be there for you. I will promise you will be okay. I promise you will have enough money financially to support this baby. And I turn around and be like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? And at the very end of it all, I'm still like, I'm in some way confident.
Yeah.
Then fine, like, we're gonna keep the baby, and that doesn't mean I was forced out an opinion, but that does mean that I was somehow persuaded, and being persuaded is different from being, you're not allowed to have babies or you have to have a baby. Like, it's nothing like that.
I think that's actually one of the points behind this whole film is like if you can't have the discussion, then there's no way it's going to be accurate. The results are going to be good.
This total breakdown of communication between the partner and the mother.
I was going to say between just generally with the whole feminist MRA thing, it's like, and I wouldn't say I'm an MRA at all.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just.
I think you're whatever you think you are. I think I'm a stronger feminist. Look, I know you roll your eyes every time I say this, but I understand that there is a rape culture out there, and that
I would say it is in some countries, but not
obviously.
here.
Yeah. But like, they were at jumping back to the very start of the film, they were talking about that rape in India with the lady at the back of the bus. Yep. And I remember reading about that and being absolutely terrified, because I'm thinking, like, apparently they use like crowbars.
Yep.
It was horrible. And I'm like, I can't imagine being a woman in that situation. I'm really sorry. And the shitty thing is that there's this thing where it's one person just ruins it for everyone else. Like, one person could be that psycho rapist maniac, and it could just paint every other, like, not just men, women as well. One feminazi paints the rest of us in a horrible light.
There's a as with anything like this, it's like they take that one case and they use it as an opportunity to push their agenda, and that's always like.
I think that's wrong. I think it's the same thing as the fact that, once again, you're going to roll your eyes at me, but like, the whole Muslim and terrorism thing. One group of people do something, and all of a sudden, all Muslims are terrorists, and that's not a thing, and that's not true.
No, of course not.
And it's. Like I said, same idea. One man rapes a woman, and all of a sudden, oh my god, all men are rapists, all men are misogynists, they're out to get us.
It's not it's a bit more sinister than that, because if people say all men are rapists, then everybody goes, it's ridiculous. But they say that
all men are capable
They
of
say
rape.
stuff like all men are capable, and then they say it's toxic masculinity or something like that, and it's that's more subtle and it's more convincing.
I think
if
it's
you
like
use it like that.
jumping to something completely out of the blue, but like there's this whole thing about subtle racism in society, and it's kind of like that too, like that subtle. What's the opposite of misogyny?
Misandry.
Yeah, it's kind of like subtle that because, well, like if a guy's, like I said, abused or something, and you go, "Well, fucking man up,"
Yeah,
that's very like that's not right. You know, they have equal amount of, they should have an equal amount of right to seek help and aid when something like that happens. But because of the way we're conditioned, we're thinking, well, you know, men can't be abused because they're the abusers. So how can an abuser be abused?
Yeah.
But then if you think back to it and you go, well, actually, it's a 50-50. It's a 50-50 thing. Half the women, or half of the women, half the men, all are victims of abuse.
Well, that's the other thing as well. Is later on in the film, I think it gets really interesting near the end because it introduces a woman who's been around for a while. What's her name? Erin Pizzey, she started up the Chiswick Women's, I think, house or something like that, and that was it's basically like one of the first like domestic violence shelters.
I think I know it, yeah.
But she opened it for men and women initially. Like this is 1971, and what she found, she's just like, well, you know, both genders are equally as capable of violence and likely to commit violence. And what she basically said is, and she's got footage of it, like back in the 70s, like they're going with the cameras, and it's just like some of these wives or mothers or something like that going, oh, I'm quite violent, you know.
Yeah. I'm pretty violent. I hit my husband.
Yeah, and she's basically even talking, she's like, she describes domestic violence as like consensual. She's just like both parts. It's like one night the woman hits the guy and the next night he hits her back. And it's like this whole thing of like...
I think in situations like that you should just break up. Because you just bring out the fucking worst in each other. I mean, like... I can gladly say this. I've never hit my partner. And if my partner ever dare hit me, he'd be kicked out of his ass, but not in a violent way. But like, it's not bizarre to me, because if it was bizarre, it wouldn't be happening, I guess.
That's still bizarre. That's how you know it's not normal. Or not right. But like, you see these women like literally standing around just being I'm pretty violent, but like that's the most normal thing in the world. But if you think about it, if it'd been switched and if men were saying, oh yeah, I'm pretty violent, you'd be like, oh my god. Well, not only you wouldn't be shocked of them saying that, but you go, it's disgusting.
Yeah, what a horrible human being. Oh my god, he deserved to be in prison. But if a woman says it, she's like, oh, what can you do? But can I honestly say, women are terrifying. We are terrifying human. Like, I am not surprised that some men are scared of women, and like. When I say terrified, I mean like my partner's terrified of me when I get angry and I don't get something to eat by 4:00. But like, all joking aside, women can be extremely even more like, because men I think are just explosive violence. Like they get really angry, they smash something, they punch the wall,
and then it's over.
It's over. Women we brood. Well, maybe not all women. I can only speak for myself, but I brood. Okay, I can be angry for up to 4 weeks to 8 weeks. Okay, that one simmering under the surface, and and that's terrifying. And like, I think it's absolutely hilarious that they're like, oh, women can't be abused. Are you kidding me?
Well, it's interesting as well. Is there are these two other feminists who I've listened to before and I've listened to quite a lot. And one of them is Christina Hoff Sommers, who's at the American Institute, I think, in America. I can't remember exactly what department or with what she does exactly, but she was quite famous for like breaking down things like the wage gap and saying like that's rubbish. This is crap. And then you've got Camille Paglia, who's like you can tell she's one of those people, like when she's talking, it's like her brain is 3 paragraphs ahead of her mouth because she's like trying to get all of the information that she has in her. Like, she's obviously freakishly intelligent. But she's talking about like when she was in college and all that sort of stuff, that was around about the second wave period of feminism. She didn't like them because it was her wave and anything like that. It started with stuff like the colleges wouldn't allow female students out of their dorm past a certain hour. They had to be inside because it was like the college was afraid they'd get raped or something would happen to them. And she said her and her people like her basically said, well, the whole thing of being free and stuff like that, she's like, is we're allowed to risk it
Yeah.
That's the point. She goes, we're
Yeah.
allowed to risk it.
Yeah.
And she goes, otherwise you're babying us. Because
Yeah.
these victims, these little...
That is a
things.
big thing, actually.
Yeah.
Victimization, women playing the victims. That I hate. I hate it when they're like, "Oh, well, they're the victims," and I'm like, you know
and
what?
that's it, isn't it?
If we want equality, and I say equality, I don't mean like misogyny, like the idea.
You have
of,
to have one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. We can't. Obviously, I believe in the fact that you should teach people not to rape rather than don't get raped. But on top of all that, like we want all these things. Like I said. We want successful. We want the first female president. We want the first, female CEOs and all that. And I'm like, you know what? There's always going to be some give and some take. You want this, you have to give that. And it's never going to be, we're not in a situation right now where we can be like, we want all of this. We want equality, we want equal pay, we want this, we want to be, want to fucking dance on butterflies. We want no periods. I don't fucking know. We want all this, but like men have to bow down to us because, because that's literally a saying men have to bow down to us because we're superior, but we're not.
That's interesting as well because there are several people, such as Jordan Peterson, Camille Paglia, and stuff like that.
I don't know any of these people. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to need to show you these people, but they do bring, and it's not just them. There's plenty of people who make the observation that in countries like the Scandinavian countries, like Sweden and stuff like that, they have almost completely flattened that opportunity for like men and women. It's like the same.
Yeah.
And they said, and the thing is that it couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
As people and as careers because they're just the interests diverge. The more free you are to make your choice, the more different you'll be.
Exactly. I think it's kind of funny because some feminists, or maybe not feminists, some people have the idea of equality being, well, men and women do the same thing. But I think, no, because can I just say, through very, very, very terrible experiences of my own, I have found out that me and my partner are not the same person.
Really?
Hard as it to see. I mean, I'm very creative. I'm a very creative person. He's very number orientated, very logical, and in a way that kind of works because.
Well, it's interesting as well because I'll go back to the Jordan Peterson thing. He talks about it's like the difference between liberals and conservatives in America. He says like the liberals have a temperament and a sort of a personality that lends itself to creativity and ideas and things like that, but they're not necessarily great at implementation. And he said it's like conservatives aren't the most imaginative people, but they're really good at doing. And he said it's like that's why they need to talk to each other. He goes because
Bounce
it's like
off each other.
these guys can come up with these ideas and then you can mediate it somewhere, and he goes and these guys can run it for you.
Exactly.
Because and that's what.
Yeah, that's what it does.
That's how it works.
That's
it's like a men and women thing as well. Because that's how it works.
I think that's why, like, not to be really weird, but that's why there probably is two different genders. Because I think, I don't believe in God, but if God created man and women, that's probably why He created man and women. Because women, not saying women can't like have to be feminine and men have to be masculine, but like I think there's also this. Like this is a side point, but the fact that like certain ideas are masculine, certain things are feminine, I think that's bullshit too. But I think if you can just find someone who kind of balances out, because obviously people are never perfect. They're never a perfect all-rounder. People are always going to be skewed in certain ways. Like I said, I'm very impatient. I am the type of personality where if I want to do something, I have to do it now. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. in the morning. If I want KFC, I'm going to get fucking KFC. Whereas my partner is like, we'll just wait until tomorrow. Have a sleep about it. Have a think about it.
He's planning it.
Very, very, like, everything has to be planned out. Very good at planning things. But I think what balances us out is he can plan for 2 months in advance. He can keep planning. And I'm the person who's like, I have to get it done now. So we balance each other out because he'll start planning. And then after a week, I'll be like, are you done? Okay. You either fix it up now or we have to move on to something else. And that's what balances us out. And I think this idea of like, oh, well, women and men both have to do the same thing and they both have to be equally successful for it to be equal. No, that's not how it's supposed to work. I think it's men or women do what they're interested in, but then at the same time, there's always got to be an opposite side which does the other things. Because not everyone's going to be interested in the same thing. And like you said, given that freedom, they're only going to continue to diverge even further. Because I think certain women naturally enjoy certain things more. And not saying like it's not going to be like, sewing or anything like that or cooking.
The general thing is that they are, once again, it's like this women are more interested in people and men are more interested in things.
Yeah.
And it's like so women end up in caring professions like nursing and veterinary stuff, and even like biology and things like that. They end up in those fields, and men end up in business and
becoming CEOs.
And become a CEO and stuff like that, because it's
both jobs are. I think both jobs are equally important. Like, even if you're not like being paid billions of dollars every year, and you're a CEO, even if you're not that, if you're a nurse, I think that's an incredibly important job in our society, because they do so much for us, and honestly,
it's a lot of responsibility.
It's a lot,
and that's the whole thing. And if they're good at it, I mean,
there's nothing, and I think that already to me is already success. To be able to come to your job every day and be like, you know what, I am so proud of what I do. I help save people's lives, or I forward myself in certain ways, or to me that is already a very big success. And I think it's stupid to define misogyny of the fact or the suppression as the fact that we don't have that many CEOs as females. We don't have that many presidents that are female. We don't have this. We don't have that.
It's an embarrassment of riches, really. It's like,
I mean, you know what? We had Julia Gillard as Prime Minister here for a year? And it was horrible.
Was it longer than that? Yeah, it wasn't
sorry.
good.
I'm sorry to anyone who's really into Julia Gillard, but oh my God. I'm like, fuck's sake.
And then the other hand is, can you imagine Hillary? That's the other one.
I don't know. I'm actually not that familiar with American politics. Once again, I'm not that big of a fan of Donald Trump, but it was kind of like freaking hell, the devil or the Satan. I don't know. They're both pretty much the same person, just in two different faces. So either way, we were losing. And
I suppose.
I have a very, very neutral opinion about who should have been elected. I think a lot of this idea that, Hillary should have been elected because she was going to be the first female, blah, blah, blah. I think that's rubbish. I think you shouldn't elect people based on their gender. You should elect people.
That's the whole thing. It's like instituting sexism. It's like, now we have to do them.
Subtle
now
sexism.
We have to hire them based on that, based on the gender.
Well, you know what I think is stupid? This happened in high school for me, and we used to play sport, and we used to have mixed teams and gender-only teams, and and I thought it was hilarious because now that I think back to it, certain sports like netball, I can only think of netball, but netball's probably the best example. It was a girls-only team, and guys couldn't play.
Yeah.
And then for certain guy sports, there was always a girls' team, because if there wasn't a girls' team, then it was unfair.
Yeah.
And then on top of all of that, when we had a mixed team, you always had to have a certain amount of girls on the field playing. And I'm like, but why? Why is it like that? Because you shouldn't put people on to play just because they're female. You should put them on to play if they're good.
Yes.
If they're a good player, fine, put them on. But then women want equality because they say, well, we have to put it on. But I'm like, if you really want equality, you should work just as hard as part of the team and just train yourself to be just as good.
It's like if you suck, you're a detriment to the team.
Yeah.
And you're not a very good example then either.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, that's not equality. Equality is not them forcing the captain to put you on. Equality is both you and female and males have to work equally as hard to be worth putting on the field.
Yeah.
That's just exactly. If you're shit, no offense, but if you're shit, you fucking don't deserve, because you didn't work hard for anything you.
And I think it stunts the development in terms of skills if you're just sitting there going, it's because I'm a woman, isn't it? It's like, well, maybe you should get better at something.
Yeah. Or it's the fact that
you're not
I'm a
gonna
woman,
get
you
hired.
have to accommodate for me.
Yeah.
No, we don't. But once again, you're talking about that victimization and how I don't get picked because I'm a girl. No, you don't get picked because you're shit. Fucking hell.
Exactly.
Move your ass, Deborah.
That's Deborah.
I don't know. It's just a whitewashed suburban name. How long are we going for? Sorry.
Give it another 20 minutes.
20 minutes, yeah.
But it's the other part, and I think we should say that Linda hasn't seen all of the film. She's missed the ending. Just the ending bit.
I'm sorry, I fell asleep. I'm sorry. Not because it was boring, because it was 2 a.m. in the morning and I had to go to work today.
But there is I can't remember exactly the first time they mentioned, but the honey badgers are mentioned.
I actually loved the honey badgers.
Yeah.
I thought they were awesome because they encapsulated exactly what I was thinking. The whole, we don't want to find that women are better than men. We just want to find equality.
Yeah.
And that was, to me, the most purest form of feminism.
They interview Karen Strawn, who's one of them, near the end. Well, Cassie Jaye does. And it's sort of just at a bar and whatever. But she talks about actually how the difference in terms of... I mean, you can take this seriously or not, but it is an interesting case that she puts because it is about language because they do like to police language, these feminists, and say, well, you can't say fireman, you have to say fireperson or something like this sort of
Roll
really
my eyes.
ridiculous crap, which doesn't matter.
Like,
but
over there, they're not an actor, they're an actress. Or,
yeah,
now,
they're just, I don't know.
They're just what they are. It's not. They're not called firemen because
it's
men
only
are more,
a man thing.
Yeah, it's firemen because that's literally the coined term since like the beginning of time. I don't know.
But anyway, like she talks about like media coverage because she mentions there's there was, I think they've been completely eliminated now, is the Boko Haram in North Africa. I think it's Sierra Leone. I think Nigeria. I can't remember.
Somewhere.
But they are basically, fundamentalist Islamic terrorist group in operating out of Africa. I think they've been eliminated since, but they were responsible for the whole. Basically, the fallout of that was the campaign. Was it Bring Back Our Girls or whatever, wasn't it?
I think so.
Hashtag Bring Back Our Girls or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But what she says, it's like, it's the whole thing of like, you take this bit and you're looking at that and you go, oh my God, it's so tragic and so horrible. And then she said, you look at what was happening before then. And it was like, what was actually happening is they were going around to like villages and stuff like that. And she says it's like the way it was sold in the media is that this was a fundamentalist religious group, Islamic religious group that didn't want women to be educated. Because the reason why apparently they were kidnapped was because they were at school. What she actually said, she's just like, they don't just want women not to be educated. She goes, they don't want anybody to get educated. She goes, what was happening, she goes, is like for months beforehand, they were going around to the villages, rounding up everybody, telling the women to go home and burning the men alive.
Yeah.
And she goes, in all of the stories, it was like 100 people killed in this village, 100 villagers killed in this thing. And then she said, and it's weird, she goes, because we played right into their hands. She goes, because they weren't getting any attention when they were murdering the boys. Yeah. She goes, at the moment they kidnapped 300 girls, everybody was looking at it and they got their attention. She goes, and like they weren't doing anything to the girls before. And then she goes, on top of that, they didn't even kill them. She's like,
you talking about that actually just brings me back to the film where they talk about how men's lives aren't as considered as important as female lives. So like men are expected to do all the dangerous jobs like mining and all that stuff, whereas women, like for example, men will be doing some job and like a woman will try helping the men, or people will be like, no, let the guy do it, or the idea of if there's something emergency happening, it'd always be women and children first. Yeah. And it's like this idea of that men's lives aren't as important. And you know what? Obviously men die a lot earlier, but then at the same time you got to think why it sometimes does happen that way. It's because men are like in the army, only men are enlisted, and I think that's kind of strange actually, because I'm like, it's not like men can wield a gun and women can't, or men can wield weapons and women can't. It's just the idea that men have to brave the front and women can stay back and take care of the children. But I'm like, shouldn't it be a situation where, if people don't have, like, for example, it's just a couple, they don't have family or anything, and they both decide that they want to fight in the war, they should be allowed to do so. Obviously, this is going back to...
I don't know, they do make the point in it that they go through most of the major wars in the last 100 years or so, and it's like, 99% men, 1% women in the combat forces killed.
Because most of the time women are nurses or the
caretakers. And they might just be killed in crossfire. They're not willing participants in the fight lots of the time. I mean, when it gets to the more recent ones, like the Enduring Freedom, Operating Enduring Freedom, I think it's like it's a bit more, but it's not.
Yeah, because I think it's like...
It's still in the 90% range, isn't it?
But I think there's also like... Because now women are allowed to fight.
To some extent. I think it's... Like, I wouldn't... Personally, I wouldn't encourage them to do it because... I don't know. Even with all that, I don't know. There's still some part of you that goes, men should go off and fight instead.
Yeah, but I think maybe the next step is for us to just kind of go, maybe that's not the case. But speaking of in terms of men should fight, women shouldn't, it might also, because I was thinking about this, and it might also be just the idea that, going to war is a masculine thing, and then if females go to war, then you're considered masculine.
I mean, there's been a lot of really stupid, over the years, like feminist articles that say, the missiles are shaped like that because they represent the male.
Oh my god!
Like,
Are you dicking?
It's so
literally.
stupid.
Are you dicking around with me right now?
It's
That's not
really
a fucking thing.
It's a real thing. I'm pretty sure there's been lots of papers.
What? If we're going to talk about fucking ridiculous, what was it? Australia that they changed like one of the walking symbols into like a woman with a dress, and then it's one big step for feminism, and I'm like, no, it's one big step into wasting my taxpayers' money. For fuck's sake, sorry, for fuck's sake. Like, I actually was like, oh my god, like I wanted to cry because I'm like, okay, I'll pay like 10% in taxes my entire pay, and that money could be going into something that I actually need, like tampons. Ads, like TMI, but I could be using those things. No,
I'm guessing you probably pay more in tax than that.
Yeah,
well.
I don't actually know how much I pay. But like, I'm just like, the hell, man.
And that's actually another point they make is like with the shelters. It's like, it's say like men pay say around half of the tax, and it's like, but they get one shelter somewhere.
One shelter. I think there needs to be more like, obviously, men and women should be sectioned off if they feel more comfortable, because obviously sometimes women feel only comfortable around other women, but I think there should be more shelters for men as well. I was thinking when she mentioned stuff about like shelters for men only or versus women only, the film, what was it? The Pursuit of Happiness.
Yep.
With Will Smith and Jaden Smith, and how they were homeless in the film for a bit, and he didn't have anywhere to go because despite the fact that they were like, oh, your child can stay, but you can't. And I'm like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's an actual scene in the film.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I'm like, so what are you going to do? Let this child go in by himself and his dad's going to sleep outside next to the door?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's fucking stupid. I'm sorry. Just let the poor guy in. You can tell he's homeless. That's when my brain kind of just goes, huh?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, if you want to help people and you want to help people who need somewhere to stay, just help them. Like, think about how stupid it is if you've got, for example, 10 spaces at the back. Man comes up, I'm homeless, don't have anyone else to go. Sorry, you have a dick, can't come in. What is he possibly got? Just section, if you feel like the women are going to be uncomfortable, section him up from the rest. And then there's not a problem, because what's the point of you having 10 beds at the back and saying, no, you can't go, and no one else coming in?
Yeah.
This is stupid. And I just thought about that scene in Pursuit of Happiness, and I'm just like, it just makes no sense. It makes no sense to the shelters who promote the fact that they want to help people women in need. But then for some reason, as soon as you have a penis, it's like, oh, well, no, you don't need the help. It's like, your dick can help you tonight. Like, that's not a thing, guys. That's not a thing. Men who are, I think there are more homeless men than there are women.
That's another thing they say in the film as well.
Yeah, in the film.
Majority of the homeless as well.
Yeah, a majority of suicides are men as well.
Yeah.
And it's like this, I think certain feminists, I'm sorry to say, overlook these things because they're like, well, they're not convenient to my truth. They're not convenient to what I know. And I only want to hear the things that support the knowledge or the type of truth that I hear. But then I'm like, the real truth is that
doesn't support my narrative, so I need to just ignore it.
Yeah, that doesn't support the fact that, I hate men. And I'm like, the truth doesn't have to support what you like. It just has to support what's real.
Yeah.
And what's real is that suicide rates among men are the highest. Homeless rate are the highest in men as well. And I'm like, why don't we accommodate? Because I think the thing is, men don't act out like we have, or we have done so. And so all of the men who are in those situations just kind of go, well, that's just how it is. And,
it's just how it is.
Yeah, and whereas I think
I've got to work this out now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know what, maybe it is time for men just to kind of go out and be like, you know what, fucking hell, we deserve rights too. I'm not saying women don't. I still believe in women's rights.
But that's the whole, it's not negating one at the,
Yeah, like going back to what I said initially, it's not the fact that men's rights are the misogyny, are the misogynists, and the horrible people. You're all part of the same team. The misogynists are the people, like, I think a misogynistic man is literally a guy who will abuse his partner, who will literally think that he is above the law in terms of what he can do. Like,
and I'll say, like, doesn't matter if they're misandrist or misogynist, there's not that many of them, really. Like, they're not the rule.
Yeah, they're not. I don't think they're the status quo. And I think a lot of women mistaken just men being men into being stupid. No offense, guys. But men being stupid for misogyny. Like, for example, if a guy says something like, oh, I wouldn't, this is going to be a bit stupid, but I have heard it. Like, oh, I wouldn't kiss a girl who wears red lipstick. And then women go,
Okay.
misogynist. And I'm like, it's not misogyny. I mean, he's a bit of a fucking dick.
Yeah, but also the thing is like, I don't see how that's discrimination. She can
It's
always
not.
take it off. Like,
That's the thing with...
it's not a part of
Yeah,
her.
it's not like... I mean...
Maybe he just doesn't want to get any on his face.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It's like, I'm not going to kiss a girl with lips. Like, I can't say Kenji. Cut that out. But my partner doesn't like to kiss me with lipstick on because he's like, it's all over me and then I have to clean it up and it's annoying. And I'm like, that doesn't mean he doesn't love me.
Yeah.
I mean, he should love me. But, but like, it doesn't mean that. It just means, he doesn't. And like, to be fair, if you find that you're uncomfortable, like if you guys say something you're comfortable with, fine, then maybe you're not made for each other. Maybe you guys take
the
take
point
something
really
more
is
seriously
like
than the other.
your relationship problem isn't everybody else's responsibility. You've got to...
You got to figure out your own life,
Yeah.
honey. Like, ladies, if you're listening here,
Mm.
if he a scrub, honey, leave him. Leave his ass, okay? Go listen to some no scrub, Beyonce, okay? Get all riled up, and then fucking leave his ass, okay?
Just don't listen to Beyonce when she talks. Just when she
Oh my
sings.
god, you're
it's
so
fine.
mean. She's queen. She's queen bee, man. Cut that out. Cut all that out, by the way. What was I going to say? I don't remember. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we've covered most of it.
Yeah.
Really, most of the major issues. I mean, as a film, it's better than she's obviously gotten better.
Yeah,
and
than
she
Daddy
edits them
I Do.
herself
Yeah.
apparently as well. And
She's editor, producer, director. She just kind of carries a camera around in films.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure she's got others involved. I mean, it says in the credits
There's
there's
a few-
plenty of people involved,
yeah.
but yeah, I know that this was crowdfunded to some degree
Mm.
as well.
I think if people were smart, they would have wanted to see this because
I just don't, well, I do understand, and it's, they're blocking it in some places because it basically debunks a lot of their
yeah, I think
theories.
if we need to move forward in terms of all this like feminism and all that, I think people need to take a step back from their high horse because I think we've gotten to a point where women have not all feminists, but certain feminists think that they are so suppressed. They have no, and I'm like, you don't even know what suppression is to some extent because there's a lot of countries out there where women aren't even allowed voting
That's the
rights.
thing as well. It's it's like they could really turn their attention to other places,
Like,
and it's
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, I think this is the other thing. It's very clear that it's not just about feminism anymore. Either. Like it's about. There is a political ideology behind it all, and it's how it's work. It's that's what determines what they go after. Lots of the time, I can tell that, and
I just think if you're in, I'm not saying I'm like the smartest human being in the world. And no offense, but Ren, I'm not saying you're the smartest human being in the world either. But I
of
think
course not.
intelligent people should have the right mindset to be open to these types of things and to be open to this film and to look at this film as a way of furthering their knowledge about rights,
Well, that's
human
the
rights.
thing. I think most people are, but if you can't see it, then you don't get.
It's kind of like talking to a wall sometimes,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's like, this is not right, this is right, this, and they're just like, no, men are all misogynist, and I'm like, like it's like that story where that woman she found out her baby was a boy and aborted it because it was a boy, and it was so horrible, and I just couldn't. I felt like I could cry because I was like, he's done nothing wrong.
No,
Okay, a misogynist is not made of his genitalia or his gender. A misogynist, there might be a female out there who can be misogynistic, like
just
in
hates
some
other
way.
women.
No, well, not hates other women, but could think that, oh well, I'm a woman, I have to be down here and I have to do this and I have to do that, and she could be that person who tells everyone else off, who could be like, oh well, you're a woman, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be listening to your husband, but like that could be a misogynistic woman out there as well.
Yep.
Okay, and so that doesn't excuse the fact that, oh, she's a woman, she can't be a misogynist. Once again, just the same, if there's male feminists, there's going to be female misogynists. Like, even if it's like 1 in a billion, there's going to be someone.
Well,
out
I
there.
would say the equivalent of the male feminist would be the honey badger sort of thing, but not. You mean if there's a the misogynistic man, there's probably women who don't like other women.
Exactly. And I think we're so piped up. We're so like, oh, we're so empowered by the idea that, oh, we're suppressed, we should get all these privileges, in a way as compensation. I think a lot of women say, well, because of this, we need this and this and this. And I'm like, the world doesn't owe us anything. I think that's the hardest thing to grasp. the world doesn't know us and society doesn't know us anything. All we can do is expect to work hard for. Like, you should just earn what you work hard for, make your keep.
Yep.
And I think right now what certain feminists want is they want all the privileges. They want all the money. They want, people to respect them. They want equal pay. I say that with quotation marks, but they want all this stuff. But if you turn around and you go, well, can you just work for it a little harder? They go, I can't believe you would say that. I work so hard, blah, 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 I do all this. And I'm like, well, so do men. So men actually, like, if you're going to work a job that requires more skill, requires more effort, requires more experience, requires more time and just blood and sweat, and you get paid more for it compared to someone who maybe works a very, like, easy 9-to-5 retail job, and then that person goes, well, that's not fair, there's a wage gap, blah, blah. I'm like, fucking hell, do you want to go to the office at 3 a.m. in the morning? Feel free to do so. I'm pretty sure he would give up his job and let you take his position and then sit at home all day and play Xbox. I'm pretty sure he would love to do that, okay? Like, I'm not saying women can't be successful, okay? That's not what I said. I'm saying you can do that, but the thing is, I think sometimes when women complain, they're working a job that's not equal in terms of experience or in terms of skill.
Yep.
And I'm like, you can't be expected. Like, for example, if you guys are working the same exact job and he's getting paid like $10 more than you per hour, then I'm going to be like, okay, fine. If you guys are both coming at the same time, doing the same amount of hours of work, it's like staying up until 3, waking up at 7 every day, and he's getting paid more than you and he's earning more than you through his lifetime, then I'm going to be like, there's something wrong here.
Yeah. But that's the part where you go, well, you actually have to ask questions yourself about, like, the job,
the position,
like the position, and also, like, why that was put into place. Like,
exactly.
why was it in your contract that this happened? Like, you have to talk about that to somebody.
And you have to fix that yourself. No one else is going to fix that for you.
You don't go online and go, I'm just being discriminated against. It's like, what? What's that going to do?
That's what saddens me the most. That the fact that the most that some of these women do, or even men, like the feminist men, do is protest. Because I think at the end of the day, protesting literally gets you nowhere.
Well, it's interesting. Like that's another part in the film. They talk about there was one thing at the University of Toronto. It was like a men's issue thing, and it's like the feminists were just out in the corridor screaming and like just making a lot of noise so you couldn't hear what happened. And then one of them pulled the fire alarm illegally and got the whole building evacuated because of it. It's like,
this doesn't do anything. This just causes more trouble. And my taxpayers' money. My poor taxpayers' money. God damn it. Like, I'm living off instant noodles and you're using this. Like, it kind of pissed me off. I hope we're not going too much into overtime. But it really pissed me off when, like, because we used to go to uni in the city, and some days there were these huge protests that would take up all the road, and the trams would be cancelled, and the trains would be delayed, and everything. This would be like this or that will be, And you know what? At the end of the day, this did not make me feel empowered to follow a certain movement. It just pissed me off.
You're just getting in my way now.
You're just getting in my way. I'm paying like $10,000 a year to go to uni, and all you're doing is wasting my tuition time. I'm so fucking sorry that you've been discriminated against. Like, stuff, really stupid things like changing the Walking Man logo into a woman.
Yeah.
To me, that's completely insignificant. Like, it doesn't do anything.
No, it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't forward me. That doesn't empower me. Like, if some woman became like, if a decent president or a decent prime minister, female prime minister, came into Australia and became prime minister, what? But you know what I mean. Like, if a decent woman became prime minister and became the leader of Australia, I would feel empowered.
For merit reasons, she was the best.
Yeah, like she genuinely was a very intelligent, intellectual.
It's interesting because these people, the feminists and stuff like that, they're getting caught up in their own rules now because it's like you have people in French elections coming up basically, and feminists are on the left side of politics, so they tend to go towards socialism and all sorts of stuff, Marxism and things like that. And one of the biggest, most controversial figures in this upcoming French election, she wants to close the borders and all that sort of stuff. She's a woman. She's basically against most of the things that they want.
Yeah.
But she's not. It's funny. She's not against like lots of the older feminist issues like voting and all this. Like she's not going to repeal any of that. But it's like they're getting caught up because they can't accuse her of being a sexist.
Yeah,
they're
because
going,
she's a woman.
Well, what do I say?
She has a vagina.
Like, what do I say? I've heard lots of people predicting she's going to win too, but it's
just
Marine Le Pen, if you don't know.
I think what happens is, like, especially when there's such a huge movement, like a feminist movement going on, like, not saying like right now it's probably not humongous, but there is a decent.
Oh, it's pretty big.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the other thing as well. The what's her name? The woman who set up the shelter, Erin Pizzi. She basically says she was like talking about how much money is in feminism now. And it's like
so much.
She went like the violence against women thing. That whole campaign. She's like, it's worth like $1 billion a year, just constantly.
There's a lot of it has to do with money. A lot of it.
Of course.
You know what? And as shitty as it sounds, whatever it is, no matter how authentic, how real it is, there's always going to be money involved.
You just gotta question it. What are the motives and all this stuff?
Yeah. So actually, speaking of motives, I was watching. There's this ad that popped up on my Facebook feed the other week, in the past few days, and it's by Airbnb, and it talks about gay marriage. And I'm not sure if you've seen it.
I haven't.
Okay. Well, so it talks about there being a ring, and the ring's not fully, like, it doesn't circle, and
Oh, okay.
does that make sense? So there's a little gap between both edges of the ring, and they're talking about how this gap symbolizes the gap between gay marriage and how it's not legalized. And then it goes to, you can buy this ring for $4.99 on eBay. And I'm like, I see what it is. I know what's going on. And you know what? As silly as this is, I really wanted to buy one because I was like, I want to show my support. But my partner was like, don't be fucking stupid. So once again, we balance each other out. He tells me when I'm stupid, and I realize. Either way, whatever it is. I mean, I'm all for legalizing gay marriage, but come on, Airbnb.
The other thing as well is, like, the thing I don't understand about the gay marriage thing is, like, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
I just don't see what it'll really. It won't. I don't think it will take away or add anything.
Yeah.
I think it's a big issue for no real reason.
I think the big issue is exactly, weirdly enough, what you've just said. It doesn't take away or give. Yeah. So I think the issue behind that issue is that if it doesn't take away or gain anything,
then there's huge arguments on the other side. It's like, one, why bother, and two, well, why not?
Yeah,
it's like, okay.
I think it's a double-edged sword. It's kind of, it can go either way.
Especially here, I don't know what it was like in sort of America or anything like that before it was legalized, but here it still isn't. And the thing is at the moment, in terms of just the technicality of it all, in terms of actually having the same benefits, you can pretty much get it at the moment. It's just not called marriage, and that's the only thing that they have issue with at the moment.
The talk about that would probably be that once gay marriage is legalized, then it's going to be a more socially acceptable thing. Because I know, to me, it felt like for a long time that there wasn't really a lot of stigma against gay marriage until I met someone who was against it, and they knew more people who were against it. And the things they would say in regards to, just to say that it's wrong, to me is absolutely bizarre. Like, completely just, I was like, I never thought of that. Or stuff like, the one I really hear about is, how will I tell my kids that?
Yeah, that's...
two men love each other. And I'm like, look, if you can tell your kids what sex is, you can tell your kids what two men being in love. Like, that's perfectly fine. I'm just like, come on, you have to teach your kids about, like, fucking, all this fucked up shit. Like, I mean, not saying that sex is fucked up, but, like, you have to teach, if you have a daughter, you have to tell her where babies come from. Yeah. Inside of her.
Then you show her a clip from Alien, and you go, see that? No.
See that? That's pregnancy. That's pregnancy, honey.
Never show her that. Also, it's William Hurt in that scene, so you get very confused. It's a dude. Gets killed.
It's Caitlyn Jenner. Sorry. I'm sorry. Don't quote me on that.
Quote her on that.
So rude.
He does still have something that sticks out, but it's not a
apparently he's like, we won't talk about that on the podcast.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, one day we'll watch a film in regards to
will we? What's
the film? I don't know.
If I say the crying game, it's just going to spoil it for you. So, and I just did.
Yeah, you just did.
So there you go.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up.
Yeah,
it was a good discussion.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know whether it was all about the film, but it was kind of all about the film at the same time.
It was. Well, the film itself was a socially.
I mean, as far as documentary is concerned, it's just good. It's like standard fare, and it does it pretty well.
I think it's hard to talk, like, about story and character in documentaries.
Well, yeah, of course.
So I think we talk more about the issues that it does raise, and we did talk about a lot of the facts.
I think the general message or the theme in this film is, like, the conversation's important, and it's the fact that there isn't...
To educate yourselves on both sides of the stories.
That you need to hear them all.
take everything with a grain of salt, children.
Yeah. You can't just hear one side of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway.
That's all right. I hope you enjoyed.
Hope you enjoyed the discussion and whatever. We've been approved for iTunes.
Ooh,
We're not on it yet.
Oh.
It's like the next couple of days we'll be up there.
I don't know anything.
We have been approved, so yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
You'll be able to find us on there soon. So
Cool,
yeah, that should
sounds
be good. Yeah.
We'll see you next time. In 2 weeks' time?
In 2 weeks' time?
Sounds good, okay.
Excellent.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.